I now give the floor to His Excellency Walid Muallem, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs and Expatriates of the Syrian Arab Republic.
السيد رئيس الدورة السبعين للجمعية العامة.
President of the 70th session of the General Assembly, I would like to congratulate you on your election as President of the General Assembly at its current session and wish you success in leading the work of this session. I would also like to thank your predecessor for his presidency of the previous session. Ladies and gentlemen, I greet you from this great international edifice that was originally established with all its agencies in order for peace and security to prevail in the world. I greet you as I come from a country where security has been disrupted and peace has departed, a country that lives a fierce war for more than 4 years. I greet you from a land baptized by the blood of its people who fight terrorism and defend their fellow citizens against terrorism, while waiting for this international organization to fulfill its promises and implement its resolutions related to combating terrorism. The resolutions adopted by the Security Council under Chapter 7 are still only ink on paper, mentioned only in press releases and media statements. While on the ground, the countries funding, sponsoring, and supporting terrorism are still fueling extremism in the region. Those countries continue arming, training, and sending terrorists to Syria while being indifferent and unconcerned for the implementation of those resolutions. Ladies and gentlemen, I ask you, along with the resistant people of Syria, until when will the powerful member states remain to intimidate other member states committed to international law while ignoring those states that disregard Security Council resolutions? What have you done, I ask, to stop these states from executing criminal acts against the Syrian people? Why all this silence? You are witnessing these countries as they spread this extremist ideology until it reached Europe, where it hit as it is hitting the Middle East. While the sleeper cells are waking up, bombings and assassinations have returned once again in the West. What is the guilt, I ask, of the innocent people of your countries who started paying the price of supporting terrorism by some of your politicians? You know better than anyone else that terrorism is an ideology that recognizes no boundaries. You know that when this monster comes out, it cannot be limited to certain countries. The terrorism of ISIS, al-Nusra, and other Al-Qaeda-affiliated terrorist organizations is killing the innocent, capturing women and launching mortar shells on civilians. This terrorism is cutting drinking water and destroying history and civilization landmarks, including those inscribed on the World Heritage List, which is a heritage of all mankind. The last of such crimes was the destruction of the temples of Baal Shamin and Bel and the brutal killing of archaeologists. Why do some of your governments support countries that are used to export their crises outside their borders? Why do you support them while knowing that they only produce destruction? How can developed countries governed by elections and parliaments ally with countries that originally do not have parliaments and do not recognize an active half of the society, being women? How can your countries accept the ideas of sexual jihad, slaughtering, hand-cutting, burning, and systematic destruction of history, monuments, and culture? Ladies and gentlemen, based on the above, I say Syria will continue to fight terrorism in word and in deed, and the Arab Syrian army is capable of cleansing the country of those terrorists. Despite all the sacrifices and high prices paid and that we are still paying, along with the Syrian people from all backgrounds who've paid in life and all other forms in security, economy, and livelihood. I hope that for once you stand for honesty and truth. The duty of the international community is to stop this flow of terrorists coming to Syria from 100 countries, according to United Nations data, in order to create a caliphate state, which, as you all know, will not be limited to Syria or Iraq. The caliphate leaders have frequently stated that their goal stretches from Mecca to all of Europe in order to restore the glory of the caliphate according to their own interpretation. If you do not stop those member states that support terrorism, along with the terrorists they are sending, the fire that has broken out in Syria, Iraq, and Libya will continue to spread beyond. Mr. President, Syria has not stopped advocating to political dialogue and practicing what we preached based on our vision, which proved to be correct, that the fight against terrorism is a priority to move on in other tracks. Syria cannot implement any democratic political measure related to elections or a constitution or the like, while terrorism is striking at home and threatening innocent civilians in the country. How can we ask the Syrian people to head to the ballot box while they are not safe in the streets and inside their homes, while they are under the missiles and mortar shells launched by terrorist groups supported by well-known countries? Nevertheless, we were and still are believers in the political choice, the political dialogue, according to the parameters known to all, namely preservation of national sovereignty, the unity of Syria's territory and people, maintaining the state institutions, developing them and improving their performance, and that the only way to a political solution is through Syrian-led national dialogue without any foreign interference. Based on this, Syria agreed to participate in Geneva II, Moscow I and II. I would like to announce here that Syria agrees to participate in the 4 brainstorming committees of experts proposed by the Special Envoy Staffan de Mistura. Mr. de Mistura has repeatedly confirmed that these committees' role is mainly to exchange ideas and that they will conduct unbinding preliminary consultations whose agreed-upon outputs can be used to prepare for the launching of Geneva III. In the light of this, some imagined that Syria's approval of the political track regardless of its form, initiative, and names, has a connection to what they portray as the weakness of Syria's army and people on the ground. I want to say that Syria is strong and continues to fight terrorism, and that the Syrian army and the Syrian people are united in the face of terrorism. Let no one think, whoever they may be, that after all these sacrifices and steadfastness for more than 4 years, they could obtain through politics what they could not win in the field,
وأنه سيحقق
or that they will achieve at the negotiating table what they failed to achieve on the ground. The decision of the Syrian people lies in the Syrian people's hand alone, and no one can deny this right. I repeat, the Syrian people's decision lies in the Syrian people's hand alone, and no one can strip the Syrian people of this right. The Syrian Arab army astonished the world with its power and faith and persistence. Mr. President, the important invitation of His Excellency President Vladimir Putin for the establishment of an international regional coalition to counter terrorism received the attention of the Syrian government and its support. Terrorism cannot be fought only from the air, and all of the previous operations to combat it have only led to its spread and outbreak. Airstrikes are useless unless they are conducted in cooperation with the Syrian Arab Army, the only force in Syria that is combating terrorism. The announcement of the beginning of the Russian airstrikes in Syria, which came upon a request from the Syrian government and in coordination with the government, is an effective participation in the support of the Syrian efforts in combating terrorism. The so-called Arab Spring was a spring only for Israel and its undercover and known allies. Israel continues to attack Syria while the world is watching. Israel is arming the terrorists and treating them in its hospitals and helping them with its intelligence services and supporting them to stand between it and the Arab Syrian army across the border. While those terrorists weaken, it intervenes directly through airstrikes or artillery shelling, just as Turkey did and is still doing, whether in Aleppo or in Idlib, and as Saudi Arabia and Qatar are doing, and who are racing to shed Syrian blood through their different instruments. The continued support for terrorists and the escalation of their attacks on citizens in most regions and cities in Syria led to an increase in citizens' need for the basic commodities and services in many areas. The inhuman sanctions imposed by the European Union and the United States exacerbated the living conditions of Syrian civilians. At the same time, my government is cooperating with the United Nations and its humanitarian agencies within the framework of response plans agreed upon with the Syrian government to meet the basic needs of the citizens, especially those forced by the terrorist acts to flee their homes, and many of whom have resorted to some neighboring countries. Some of those countries accommodated them in camps for training on weapons, or what resembles places of detention and isolation.
عزل. إنني أؤكد أن الدولة السورية تضمن لمن يرغب.
I stress that the Syrian state guarantees the safe return and decent life for the citizens who are willing to return, At the same time, Syria continues to exert all efforts to deliver aid from international organizations to all Syrian citizens without discrimination wherever they are. Mr. President, the Syrian Arab Republic confirms its adherence to the full restoration of the occupied Syrian Golan Heights until the line of June 4th, 1967. It also emphasizes its rejection of all actions taken by Israel, the occupying power, to change its natural, geographical, and demographic characteristics, in clear violation of relevant Security Council resolutions, in particular Resolutions 497 of 1981 and 465 of 1980. Syria also confirms that the Palestinian issue is the central issue of the Syrian people, which supports the inalienable and legitimate rights of the brotherly Palestinian people, particularly the right of return and self-determination, and the establishment of an independent state on its land with Jerusalem as its capital. Mr. President, at the end of 2013, Syria accepted the initiative of the President of the Russian Federation, His Excellency Mr. Vladimir Putin, and joined the Convention of the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, based on the need to establish in the Middle East a free zone of nuclear weapons and all weapons of mass destruction. It also wanted to prove to the whole world its commitment to stand against any use of chemical weapons. Syria fulfilled its obligations resulting from its accession to the Convention and completed its commitments despite the prevailing difficult situation. Were it not for the Syrian cooperation with the UNOPCW joint mission, it would have not been possible to complete the tasks of the mission. Mr. President, the Syrian Arab Republic would like to congratulate the Islamic Republic of Iran on its steadfastness and victory in achieving the historic agreement that fulfills the aspirations of the brotherly people of Iran and recognizes the right of Iran to use nuclear energy for peaceful purposes, and lifts the sanctions imposed against Iran, as well as lifts the freeze on its assets and leads to opening up the international arena on this brotherly country. This agreement proves that the diligent and serious diplomatic approach is able to overcome all obstacles and result in peaceful and fair solutions for difficult issues. Syria stresses that establishing a zone free from all weapons of mass destruction in the Middle East is unachievable without the accession of Israel, the only nuclear power in the region, to all treaties banning such weapons, and to put its nuclear facilities under the supervision of the International Atomic Energy Agency. At the same time, we emphasize the right of all countries to acquire and develop nuclear technology for peaceful purposes. Mr. President, Syria emphasized that imposing unethical, unilateral, coercive economic measures by the United States and the European Union contradicts the rules of international law and the principles of free trade. On this basis, we congratulate Cuba on reaching an agreement with the United States that lifts the blockade imposed on it. We also renew our call to lift and stop all unilateral coercive measures imposed on Syria and the peoples of other countries such as the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Venezuela, and Belarus. Mr. President, finally, I would like to say to all those who claim their keenness for the security and safety of the Syrian people the following. If you want to gain victory over terrorism and to achieve economic and political reforms, You have to honestly implement Security Council resolutions related to countering terrorism. Only then we can begin the countdown to the end of war in Syria, until we get to the final quarter hour and open the doors to implement what is agreed upon in the political dialogue. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs and Expatriates of the Syrian Arab Republic for his statement.